Hi, I'm Kimberly with the Fat Quarter Shop, and I'm here with Annie from ByAnnie, and she has this awesome bag called the iCase. So tell me about your pattern.
All right, this is a fun little bag that you can use to carry your iPad mini, your regular size iPad, a tablet, paperwork, whatever you want to put in it, even just as a cute little clutch bag. It opens up so you've got room to store that, and then on the back of each one is a zippered pocket so you can put your cords, your chargers, any of those in there. And it just closes with Velcro. It's really simple and easy to make. You make it with soft and stable so you have nice padding and body and stability, and then you bind the edges, and super simple and easy to do.
And it's great for beginners because it's kind of an easier one of your easier bags.
And no quilting. So you just sew the soft and stable to it, and you don't have to quilt it, so it's fast to make too.
And it's got two sizes. So she's going to show us how to make this now.
I'm going to show you the steps to make a small iCase. The steps are going to be exactly the same. For the larger one, you're just going to have different dimensions. And in your pattern, it's going to tell you exactly what size to cut everything. But basically, you're going to want to start with 3 fabrics. One that's going to be your main fabric, and that's going to make the outside of your bag. One for your lining, and then I like to do something that has a nice contrast for my bindings, a border that goes on the front, and the binding that goes around the outside. You're going to need a zipper, and I like to use ByAnnie's handbag zippers because they've got extra wide zipper tape and big pulls. They're easy to do. They come in 48 fun colors, so you can find one that really matches your project well. And then you're going to need a strip of Velcro to fasten the flap. If you wanted to put a magnetic snap in there, you could, but I kind of steered clear with that. Since I was putting an iPad in there, I didn't want that magnet so close to my iPad, so I used Velcro. So that's what the pattern includes instructions for. The first thing that you're going to do is use the soft and stable to stabilize your fabric for the body of the iCase and the pocket. And so you've got 3 pieces of soft and stable cut, one that makes the body of the iCase, one that makes the front pocket, and one that makes the back pocket. And you're just going to take the main fabric for one of those pieces, and it's going to be cut a little bit smaller than your piece of soft and stable. I find it much easier to sew on my soft and stable if my foot is resting on something evenly all the way around. So when I attach it first, I always cut my soft and stable a little larger. And I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around this piece. If you have a walking foot, that makes your layers move evenly. If you use a 1/4 inch foot like I do so that I can tell where I'm close to it, I just use my stiletto and hold it at right angles to keep everything moving evenly. After I have that sewn in place, I'm going to trim my soft and stable even with the edges. And then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to sew my lining on there. So on here you can see I've already done that. But if I hadn't, I would have trimmed that, I would have laid my lining on there, and then I'd stitch it in place. So it's going to look just like this. The reason I do that in 2 steps is that I'm able to keep everything smooth on each side. I can smooth the front out really well, smooth the back out, and I don't have any wrinkles or creases in either one of the layers. If you tried to put all 3 layers and sandwich it, it would be hard to pay attention to what's on the bottom. So you're going to get that sewn together. You're going to do that exact same step for the front pocket, the back pocket, and then you're going to take what becomes the main part of your bag, lay it on this larger piece of soft and stable, and do exactly the same there. So when you're done, you'll have 3 pieces of fabric with linings on them, all stabilized with soft and stable, and then we're ready to start putting our bag together. We're going to start by preparing the front of the case, and this is the piece that has a little strip of hook and loop fastener put onto it. So we're going to mark a line, and the pattern will tell you exactly where to mark it, but we're measuring up from the bottom and drawing a horizontal line. I like using the Clover chalk marker because the line disappears really easily and it's very temporary. So I'll mark a line, and then I'm going to center the scratchy side of my hook and loop fastener right on the bag. One tip, a washable glue stick works really well. You just run it along the back of your hook and loop, and then you can position it and it holds it in place. It would be really hard to put pins in this and hold it in place. So you get that on there, and then I like to stitch twice around my piece of hook and loop because it's going to get a lot of wear and tear every time you open it, and you want it to be really securely in place. After you've got that attached, then we're going to add a little shape to the front of this. If you look on our in-process bag here, where we've got our front attached to the body of the bag, you can see it kind of dips in a little bit in the center, so you can see whatever you've got stored in there, and it just makes it a little more interesting. So in the pattern, you've got a template that's all set and ready to go, and I just take it and line it up on the edge of my pocket and then cut it with my rotary cutter. And we're just going to run right along the edge of our template from one side to the other. After I get that done, I'm going to go back. It looks like I missed a little bit there. I'm going to go back with my sewing machine and re-stitch to seal that edge so that everything's held together. Then we need to bind this edge. And when we're doing bindings, normally if I'm doing a binding across a straight edge, I just cut my fabric on the cross grain. But anytime I'm doing something with a curve, I want to make sure that I'm cutting bias binding because I need my fabric to flow nicely along that curve, and that way it lays flat and looks beautiful. So that's going to be our next step, is to make some bias binding that's going to match our project perfectly. Almost all of my patterns are designed so that I use binding to cover the raw edges because I really think that gives it kind of the Cadillac finish. And so I want my binding to really blend beautifully with my project, and I want it to be just the right size. So I always make my own bias binding using a fabric that blends with my project. To do that, I start with a square, and in the pattern I'll tell you exactly what size that square needs to be so that you have enough to have plenty of bias binding for your project. So we're going to start with a square of our fabric, and we're going to cut it in half diagonally from corner to corner, which is going to give us 2 triangles of fabric. Then we need to sew those together so that our bias edges are on the outside, so when we cut our strips we've got bias binding. So we're going to take each of these triangles and rotate them. And one of them we're going to rotate so that we have a mountain. The other we're going to rotate so that we have a valley. So the point's up on one, down on the other. And then I kind of butt them up next to each other, and that's what I want it to look like when I'm finished. I'm going to sew them together along this edge. Be careful when you sew these together that you're getting the right edges sewn together. So I'm going to lay them like that, and then I'm just going to take the valley and fold it over onto the mountain until I have what looks like this. Then I usually turn it this way so I can put my pins in. And we're going to offset each side just a little bit so we have our little dog ears here. And our goal when we sew this is to sew a 1/4 inch seam across here that begins and ends at each of these cleavages. So you can kind of eyeball how far you need to do it just by looking at where your 1/4 inch seam would fall. It wouldn't hurt to even use a pencil to mark a line on there so that you get them lined up if this is something that's new to you and you're not familiar with it. Then I'm going to just pin this together. I'll take this to my sewing machine, I'll sew a 1/4 inch seam across there, and then I'll press that seam open. When I'm done, I'm going to have something that looks like this. So it's a parallelogram with a seam in the middle. It's really important when you go to cut your strips out of this that you're cutting on the bias edge. It's not so hard to tell on a small piece like this, but when you have a great big square, sometimes it's a little bit easier to get confused. And if you cut your strips on this edge, all you have is straight grain binding with a ton of seams in it, and you kind of defeated the purpose. So you really want to make sure that your angle is angled when you cut, and then you're cutting. I always even test when I was new at it, test it to make sure that's your bias edge. Now on a piece this small, it wouldn't be hard to lay your ruler on there and cut your strips, but here's a little tip, especially if you've got limited space, if you're at a class trying to cut this, or if you don't have a very big ruler or a great big square, is you can fold these edges over so that this is right along your seam, same angle. Fold this side over so that it's along there and your edges are even here and here, and then you can cut your strips from that really easily. One of my favorite rulers for doing this is the Creative Grids Quick Trim and Circle Ruler, because it's 4.5 inches wide, and I always cut 2 1/4 inch strips for my binding, so I can lay it right on here with my edges even, cut a strip to get 4.5, and then there's a line that's white that's right at the 2 1/4 inch line. I bring it down and cut along it, and I've got 2 strips cut really simply and easily. So I'll cut those 2, I'll move this up and cut 2 more, and then I just need to join those strips, and I'll have a long piece of bias binding for my whole project. After I've got my bias strips joined, I'm going to pin each strip in half, and we need just a small strip to bind that little front pocket. So we're not even going to bother to sew this to anything right off the bat. We're just going to do it with this single strip without it being sewn to another. And you will notice that I did not press my binding in half. One of the best tips that I learned in the very first quilting class I ever taught was to only pin your binding, not press it, because you get much smoother and much better looking binding. So pin it every 3 to 6 inches, and then we're ready to attach it to the back of our bag, back of the front of our bag. So we're going to go to the back side. We're going to have stitched along here to join these edges first, and then we're just going to line it up. We're going to make sure that we've got binding top and bottom all the way to the edge. So that little angled piece we're just going to let hang out over the edge, and then we're going to line this up on here, and I don't bother to clip it in place, I just start stitching. But you're going to notice that when we get to the areas where the curves are, the important thing is that we're always keeping our binding edges even with the edges of our piece. We'll sew that all together with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we'll turn it to the front. Just going to pin this here. We'll turn it to the front and bring it over and stitch right along our folded edge. Because we didn't fold any sharp creases in there, everything's going to smooth out and fill it beautifully, and we're going to end up with a nice bound edge that's nice and smooth and looks really good. After we're done with our front, then we're ready to go do the pocket that will go on the back. So let's talk about that next. We've got our front pocket done, and now it's time to do the back pocket. And the back pocket is the one that has the zipper so that you can put your cords and chargers in there. I like to use handbag zippers because they're easier to install and they've got the extra big pull. I always want to use one longer than my pocket, so this one's probably 2 or 3 inches longer. If your fabric has a direction, make sure that you're sewing the zipper on the top side so that your flowers are upright. We're going to take our zipper, we're going to put it down on top of our pocket. So we've got right sides together, our pocket's right side up, our zipper's right side down. We're going to make sure that the open end of the zipper is to the left, and that if we have stops on it, we've got those hanging off on each end. And then we want to make sure that we don't see our pocket under here at all. So we're going to scoot our zipper just a tiny bit beyond it so that it's just about that far beyond. And a lot of times, especially when I was new at this, I would do this from the back so I could see that. Put my clips on there. I want to see just 1/8 of an inch or so of zipper tape hanging out beyond that. I'm going to put my clips on to hold that in place and get that held right where I want it. After I have that clipped in place, then I'm going to sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam. And on my Bernina, my number 37 foot, which is the 1/4 inch foot, is just the right size that one side goes along the side of the zipper, the other side goes right along the zipper teeth, and it gives me a perfect 1/4 inch all the way up and down. If you've got a machine with a really fat foot, you may have to switch to a zipper foot, but give your 1/4 inch foot a try first before you change needle or feet on your machine. So again, we're going to sew all the way down on that with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we're going to finger press it to the back, the zipper tape right up flat against our pocket, and we're going to stitch all the way down right along the edge of our zipper tape. That's going to hide all our raw edges underneath and give us our nice top stitching on the outside. and our zipper will be installed in our pocket. Then to make things really pretty and professional, we're going to add a binding on the top edge of the zipper so that it looks really finished when it's added into our bag. So you can see it's going to look like that on the back of our bag. So to do that, this pattern actually has you cut the binding a little bit wider than the pocket. So if it's a little bit off, it doesn't matter. You're going to trim it once it's installed. So we're going to take this to the back. We're going to line it up there. And again, if you're new at this and want to do wonder clips to hold everything in place, that's certainly allowable. We're going to clip it. I usually do 2 or 3, and then we're going to sew again a 1/4 inch seam with that, bring our binding around to the front, and just stitch along the folded edge so that it's even all the way across. We're not going to trim the excess zipper tape on the ends until we have it sewn into our bag. So leave this excess zipper tape out here until we're ready to put the bag together, and that's our next step. We're ready now to get the main part of our bag done, and we're going to start by positioning it with our lining side up. We're going to mark a line across the top so we can align our other piece of hook and loop fastener. And this is going to be the loop side, or the soft side, that we're going to center right in place on there and stitch around it twice. Don't forget that your little washable glue stick works really well to hold that in place. After we've got that sewn in place, we're going to flip it over and we're going to attach a border on the outside. The purpose of this border is to give us a little bit of more color on the front, and also to cover up the lines of stitching that we did to attach the hook and loop fastener. So we're going to mark a line for it, a horizontal line to line it up. We're going to fuse some interfacing on the back of our border strip to make it nice and smooth and not let our lining or our main fabric show through our border. And then we're just going to stitch across that with a 1/4 inch seam, bring it up and clip it in place, stitch it in place, and then trim it even. So it's probably going to be a little bit bigger all the way around to give you a little wiggle room there. I would turn it over and do that stitching to join the layers from here, and then trim the edges even. Then the outside of our bag is done. The front of our bag is done, and the back pocket is done, and we're ready to assemble all of those to make our bag. And we're going to do this in a couple different steps. It doesn't really matter whether you do, actually it does matter. We're going to do the back pocket first. So we're going to flip this over so that the main part of our bag is up, but we're going to put the back pocket down at the bottom. So our border's going to be at the top. We're going to position our pocket in place. On here, we're going to put some wonder clips all the way around to join those layers. Hold everything nice and tight together. As you can see, wonder clips are ideal for this. If you tried to put pins in, you'd got a lot of layers. It's hard to get pins without bending them. The wonder clips open really wide and hold the layers together really nice and tight. As with all of our zippers, we're going to sew across the top edge of the zipper first, then down the right, across the bottom, up the left, making sure that before we stitch across this side, we pull our zipper pull to the inside. Because this will already be stitched down, it's not going to lift up and get wonky on you when you go to sew across there. After that's done, we'll just use our rotary cutter to trim our zippers even with the sides of our bag. And then we'll flip this over, and I'm going to pull this around now, and we're going to put our front on the front of that bag. So we've got our back pocket sewn in place with the border, we've got our front pocket, and now we're going to round our corners and then bind the edges. We've added our front and our back to our body of our iCase, and now we're ready to round the corners and bind the edges. We are so almost done. So again, I like using a little circle ruler to do this. On this project, it's not vitally important that you have exactly the right size, but I like these whenever I'm doing something where it is, because I know I'm getting my circle exactly the right. On this one, I'm going to round all the corners with a 2.5 inch circle. So I line it up so that the edges of my circle match the edges of my bag, and then I just use the rotary cutter to go around the edge. When you get down to the bottom here where you've got a lot of layers, you kind of have to do a little bit of rocking with your rotary cutter as you go to go carefully through all those layers. There I've got my 2 corners rounded. I'm going to go to my machine and stitch 1/8 of an inch around those so that all of those layers are held together really well before I start binding, and I'll also finish rounding the other corners as well. Then I'm ready to attach the binding. And something to pay attention to when you're doing binding, I like to always do it on bags and purses completely by machine, because it just doesn't seem worth the effort to do hand stitching on things that are going to get a lot of wear and tear. Normally when you're binding a quilt, you sew the binding on the front and you turn it to the back and hand stitch it down so that it looks the best on the front. But when you're doing binding by machine, I usually want to sew it to the back first and then bring it to the front and stitch it down. So it's going to look the best on the front. On a little project like this, there's a little wrinkle that gets thrown in, because you would consider this the front of your bag. And so if you were going to bind sewing on this side first and bringing it around to the front, you would sew here and bring it around, but that then becomes what is the back here. So you'd start here, but what is the back here is actually the front when you close your bag. So we've got front and back different on the top of the bag as compared to the bottom of the bag. So you kind of have your choice of where to start, but I feel like this part of the bag is the most visible. My eye's going to go straight to that, so I want it to look the best. So I'm going to consider that the front, and I'm going to start my binding here. I want to start close to a corner so that I have as much room as possible to join. I may not want to have my join right in the middle of the front, so I may start on one of these sides instead. So I would probably round this corner, start my binding, sewing it here, coming around this side, ending here, joining my pieces there, and then turning my binding around to the front so that when I'm done, I've got a beautiful binding all the way around. And if you do it so that you've got things lined up, it's going to look pretty much as nice down here as it does up here, and you're going to have a beautiful little case for carrying your iPad mini, your tablet, or just your makeup. Cute little fun bag to make. This is iCases from Patterns by Annie and ByAnnie.